Welcome, everyone, to another lovely episode of Nightcap. I am, as always, Maria. I have a beverage today. I never tell anybody they have to bring a beverage. If you happen to have one, my good friend, whom I will introduce in a second, fantastic. But today I have a tea. It is a chocolate Rubio's tea in a mug that says "The Tears of My Enemies," and the tears of my enemies today are sweet, so and decaffeinated. But that is okay. Hello, my good friend here.
How's it going?
Hello. It is going. It is things are progressing. The world is moving, and I along with it. Everyone, I have brought to you today, to this table, the magnificent, the glorious, the fantastic DeAngelo. If you've not seen DeAngelo's face or fantastic video background somewhere on the internet in the TTRPG space, I don't know which is more known, your name or that particular ball pit.
Right.
At least in my brain, they're both synonymous with you, and it's fantastic. But DeAngelo has kind of touched a ton of TTRPG spaces and places in the time that I've known of them and known them, which comparatively is not very long for me. But you've been in this space for what seems like forever. So why don't you tell people who you are, some of the stuff that you're kind of doing and touching and playing in this online space?
Sure, yeah. So my name is DeAngelo Murillo, and I'm a freelance writer, doing TTRPG stuff and like different projects and all that kind of stuff. Event organizer as well, doing charity events and whatnot from Phoenix, Arizona. And I have a huge passion for like fantasy, sci-fi, in particular, like tabletop role-playing games. So much so to the point where I actually like made my own like dark fantasy TTRPG called Emerald Templars, which I poured a lot of heart and soul and love into it, and then just like recently released, and people who have gotten it and got to check it out have had like wonderful things to say about it, which will like help just like ease my anxiety quite a bit, But when I'm not writing, I am being a dad to two wonderful boys, one of which is like 8 years old and the other one is 4 months old. So in my cup today is coffee, caffeinated for sure, because even though it's 6:12 p.m., I have a long night of writing. So yeah.
Listen, when the caffeine calls, we don't say no unless you have. Listen, don't listen. Take care, everybody. But also, sometimes we must do what we must do. And you're doing a ton. You're doing a lot these days and in days past. On top of being, a dad.
Yes.
You've been, from the time that I've known of your existence on the internet, basically making things like all the time. I'm seeing you in everything and touching everything and writing everything, and it's so wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you've worked on, but before we do that, I want to ask for you to. This is going to sound like a big, broad question or statement. Tell me your TTRPG journey.
Sure, yeah. So it started off in 2008. I was 18 years old, and around that time, that's when Penny Arcade had released their 4th edition, which just also came out as well, podcast, where it had like Scott Kurtz, and then Chris Perkins, and then the guys from Penny Arcade, and they had like released Adventure. And when I listened to it, it was like the funniest thing I'd ever heard in my entire life, and I was cracking up at these dudes just like learning the game and then doing it, which felt very like comforting, because anytime I saw Dungeons and Dragons in media, it was already like they all knew how to play. There was no questions at all, and like it was one of those things where like it was very exclusive, because every time I found a group, I wasn't able to get like invited in or anything like that, So when 2008 rolled around, listening to that podcast, it gave me the courage to spend my entire like grocery store courtesy clerk paycheck on the Player's Hand Guide, Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual for 4th edition. That bundle. It was like $150 or something like that. And when I got that thing, I just like cracked it open, was so excited, and also extremely overwhelmed by all the text. And like, because I have ADHD, so it's extremely hard for me to learn from like written material sometimes, unless I have a huge like care about it or whatever. And it was extremely difficult. And at that time, there weren't as many resources as is today for like learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Mainly, you saw the hate that fourth edition got, and then people recommended just getting 3.5 or whatever. So I had to sit there with the book and like studied harder than I've studied for any test in my entire life. And thankfully, when I mentioned to my friend group that I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, like there was a horde of people being like, I want to play, like, please let me play. So I got some friends together and like made a horribly railroaded adventure, got a lot of things wrong, constantly had to stop and look at the book, or like just make a call right then and there. And I felt like I did the worst job in the world, because it was nothing like Chris Perkins, like dungeon mastering, it was far from that. So thankfully at the end of the session, I was like, all right guys, that's all I got for you, like sorry about all my mistakes, sorry about da da da. And then they're like, no, that was amazing, that was wonderful, like when's the next session, like can we do it weekly? And I was like, oh my god, sure, yeah, I guess, yeah. Exactly. And DeAngelo from 2018 was an extreme people pleaser, low self-esteem, and all that sort of stuff. So I apologize profusely for like every single little thing, but they were like, DeAngelo, that was great, like, you did a great job. And then I was like, oh, okay. So it was the first time in my life that I've ever been told that I was good at something, like genuinely, So it was really beneficial for my like self-esteem. And as I continued to play, I got obviously better at the rules, better at storytelling, and better at dungeon mastering as well, by not railroading, bringing out the players' interests, and making sure that everyone's engaged and has agency and everything like that. And I think it's because I was a people pleaser. I had enough emotional intelligence and empathy, thanks to trauma probably, to like read the room constantly and make sure everyone was having a good time, to the point where it was it spread like wildfire around the friend group, of being like, hey, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, there's this guy named DeAngelo that I'm friends with, and he is like so good at it, you got to ask him to get into a game. And then sure enough, it like at parties, I would be in the back like drinking soda, because like so people would come up to me and be like, are you DeAngelo? I'm so sorry, like, I don't know, you don't know me, but like, can I like play Dungeons and Dragons with you? I heard you're amazing. And I was like, I guess. And then he goes like, okay, cool, we'll buy you pizza, we'll buy you soda, we'll get, we'll do whatever,
dream.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Feed me, I will be a better GM.
Exactly. And sure enough, as the months rolled on, like one group turned into 2, which turned into 3, and turned into 4. And then eventually I had like a year and a half in, I had like 4 groups going at the same time in a shared universe with like storylines that intersected. So it was like a huge like thing, which was which like, it sounds cool, and at moments it was cool, but as the only writer working on that project, it was horrible, because it was like so.
It sounds like instant anxiety for me, of like, that's just a lot of work.
It is, so but it was really fun, because but it also led to real life drama where 2 rival like kingdoms would like get pissed in real life because someone screwed over someone else's plan, and like their favorite NPC died, and I'd just be like, okay, like I caused this, I feel so guilty, like so yeah. And then and it was like a lot of fun for a while. And then fast forward to and I'll speak a little bit about this too. So that was in 2008 is when I started my journey, not 2018. So 2008 I started my journey, and going on until like 2014 or 15 or so, that's when 5th edition came out, and I resisted it heavily because I just bought like all the books for 4th edition, learned all the rules, had everything down pat, and suddenly everything was gone, and I had to learn 5th edition. So I like transitioned over to 5th edition, and granted I like 5th edition, it's like really good. Got into it and everything. And all the while, like I was struggling myself with like, corporate jobs and like, call center stuff and everything. Nothing was fulfilling. Nothing really like made me happy until it got to the pandemic and everything shut down. Cause like my heart and soul as a writer was actually for my blog called thegeeklife.com. And we went to conventions, interviewed a bunch of people. A lot of people loved it, got a name for myself, got invited to a bunch of cool events for like San Diego Comic-Con and all that sort of stuff. But it still didn't fill the void in my heart until in 2019, everything came crashing down because of COVID. Like no more conventions, were happening. Everyone was locked indoor, which means my website like tanked, went from I don't even know what it was, like 30,000 views a month to like that 1,000 or whatever. So super depressed. And because there was nothing to do during the pandemic, the online virtual TTRPG space started to explode because of that. So I also was one of those people that I was like, hey, could I please like join a group or what have you and all kind of stuff. And I was like really self-conscious, and I was trying to like shift over to the TTRPG space. So I reached out to a bunch of people to interview in the TTRPG space, and one of those people was Carlos Luna, who I like, who's super cool, super chill. And everyone else in the TTRPG space was like, sure, send your questions, I'll answer them. And I was like, okay, cool, but he got back to me, he's like, hey, do you have time for a Zoom call? And I was like, I guess. And then like, which is super intimidating, so we got a Zoom call, and for 2 hours he essentially like told me, I know what you're doing and you're doing it wrong, and here's how you should actually do it. And like, so because and it was like life-changing advice that he had given me, because essentially like he called me out because as a creator and as a writer, I like am like a hyper creative, so I need to be working on stuff all the time, and my ideas aren't small and humble, they're huge and massive. Like I want to take on Goliaths. And but when I was working on my blog, that was a situation where I was hiding behind my team. So I was the main writer for everything. I was organizing all the events, I got all the accolades, but no one knew that, because I hid behind like, oh, we're the Geek Life, we're a community and a team, so we're all equally working for this, so we all equally share the credit, when really I was doing 99% of the work and everyone else was doing like 1% of the work. But I was so self-conscious that no one would like a brown chubby geek, who was the main writer of this. So yeah, so I hid, and then he called me out. He was like, I know what you're doing, like you're doing all the work and yet you're giving them the credit, like, and that's not cool, like, so when you come into the space, DeAngelo has to be in front of everything, and like everyone else can be behind you, because we need someone like you in our community, and and it just exploded my mind. And like I was like, okay, I'm gonna really lean into this thought. And then that's when I started to get into different communities, started to organize events on my own, and started to really reach out to different people. And I found that people really do like me. They do like this brown chubby geek, so that was like really, really cool. And it helped my self-esteem, also with therapy, and like and until the point where I started to be like, okay, cool, well, I love these TTRPG games like a ton, but none of them really capture like my culture, capture like the representation I really want to see, and progressiveness and everything like that. So I'm just gonna create my own TTRPG. And then sure enough, that's what led to me creating like Emerald Templars, and then getting a bunch of other creators who were like, hey, do you also feel the same way that no one really represents your culture really well? Well, come on my ship, and you have free reign to create whatever you want, and then like get money from it and everything, and then
get paid?
move forward.
Wow.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Imagine.
So like being the change that I actually wanted to see in the community, so it's like, so that's where I am now, where from 2008 to 2023 is this journey of like always wanting to do big things but not having the courage to actually do it, until like finally I'm in my stride, I feel like, for 2023, where like I already have like 2 other TTRPGs I really want to make, and I am going to make them, so it's like, it's really cool. Yeah, it's like, it's really awesome.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, sorry about that word vomit, but like...
Oh no, it's absolutely perfect. Because it sets me up for so many things. But like it's always so fascinating for me to hear like what brought people to this space being the online TTRPG community, or the online space at large. And I love that it was started what feels like an absolute eternity ago. Like 2008 was so it doesn't even exist in my brain anymore. Yep. That's how long ago that it feels. But that it's not dwindled. It doesn't feel like this cool thing that you discovered in 2008. It hasn't
Yeah.
seemed to dwindle. In fact, it seemed to has gotten bigger and
Mhm.
more vibrant and more beautiful in a way,
Yeah.
and more yours. It feels like you've taken this passion for this cool little fun game over here in the corner and made it into something that actually means more than just a game.
Yeah.
Which is, I really, really want to talk about Emerald Templars. If people are unaware of what Emerald Templars is, you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but what is Emerald Templars? And what was your inspiration? I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit more. If there's anything else you want to expound about, like your inspiration for making it, or making it specifically the way that you did,
Yeah.
I would love to hear all of those.
Yeah, for sure. So Emerald Templars is a dark fantasy tabletop role-playing game which focuses on this neutral faction called the Emerald Templars. And it takes heavy inspiration from the Grey Wardens from Dragon Age, or like the Witchers from Witcher, and the Night's Watch from Game of Thrones. This like neutral group of people that are like, we have a mission to protect the realm from like this great evil, and the rest of the world is like, well, that's just myth and fairy tale. You guys are wasting your time, essentially, whatever, you know. And that's the same vibe in Emerald Templars, because back in the day they absolutely were heavily needed, because they defended the realm from anyone who was like abusing magic or like religious power in different ways. So there were like mage tyrants and like necromancer lords and all these sort of things that were just and it was usually for the elites and the nobles that were had access to it, whereas the common folks didn't really have that until this uprising happened. And sure enough, they began to liberate different cities and all that. But over time, they no longer were really super needed, and governments were able to regulate their own sort of lands with their own standing army, and had reasonable restrictions on magic and all that kind of stuff. So now it is this faction of like just kind of there for honor, or honorific style, or just symbolic and everything. But it still helps out the community, because if you join the Emerald Templars and serve, you'll get like time off your sentence if you committed a crime. You get money to invest in like a business or whatever the case might be, to get renowned, to be like, I served our community as an Emerald Templar, so you should vote for me for this political election or whatever. So people usually come to the faction not because they actually want to serve and defend the realm, but to like a means to an end. But the moment that they sign the contract and are magically bound to serve and protect the realm, that is when usually the weird stuff happens, and the whispers and the cults and like the things from the great beyond suddenly arrive, and they're bound to be like, you are an Emerald Templar, so you have to go and investigate this, like and one of the main reasons I created Emerald Templars was because I absolutely love fantasy games and media and all that kind of stuff. But there was a two-prong issue. One, I never saw myself represented in any sort of fantasy like media. So if you look at like Harry Potter, you look at Lord of the Rings, you look at any of the popular sort of media, they don't have brown characters there that are prominent in and the main character. They're usually like comic reliefs, or they're like criminals, or like the sex icons and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make sure that like my Mexican heritage and like was properly represented in different ways, and not because there's so much to draw from. There's so much beauty in my culture and everything, and I wanted to really, really focus on that, so people can see that it's like more than just like tacos, and more than just like Cinco de Mayo or whatever. And in doing this, I also wanted to share the load essentially with other people who also loved fantasy, that had their culture either misrepresented or not represented at all in the fantasy media. Because if you look at the history of like different TTRPGs touching on different cultures, they always do a horrible job, because they never have people from those cultures on their teams, and or if they do, they're extremely like restricted on what they can and cannot do. So I wanted to do the polar opposite of that, where I bring them in, and then they go wild with whatever they wanted to create, and then be able to move forward with that. Which like the writers had a great time working on it. They loved it so much, and I learned a lot from it as well. and it was really really cool to have this like fantasy setting. So it's in my opinion, the diversity and representation is not like shoved in your face. You know, it's just a part of the world. Like it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
a thing. You know, and then the other thing, the second issue that I had with a lot of fantasy media was the fact that mental health is not really a thing that exists for a lot of games, unless you're
Mm-hmm.
playing something like, you know, Call of Cthulhu, and it's only for going like insane, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So for me, as someone with a lot of anxiety from like different situations, like just talking to someone that I you know I have to talk to, or even like confronting someone on a slight little issue, my anxiety builds. So like thinking about someone who has to go into the depths of the earth to fight the undead or watch their companions get like destroyed by magic, you know, that's anxiety inducing. That's real, like, you know, that's hardcore. So I didn't like how people would do that and come out and be like, oh, it's cool, and then just like continue on forward. You know, I wanted to get that experience of like, you're gonna face a like cult who's trying to summon, you know, a demon or something like that. Like that shit's scary, you know. And so you're gonna take some anxiety from that, and if you don't manage your emotions or the emotions of your companions, then it will lead to breakdowns, you know. So you might not die from an arrow or a sword or a spear. You might actually have like a legit breakdown or get trauma, and that's gonna, you know, sort of wear you down and break you down. So it's caused a really cool like environment now, like organically, thankfully, that when playtesters that played, you know, Emerald Templars, they would come in with that D&D sort of like mindset, and then when they get it, they're like, oh shit, I can't actually like play it like D&D, like I have to take my time and go slow. And then people then are like, okay, you know, I invested in therapy, so I'm a therapist, so I can like help us like, you know, get through this a little bit easier. Let's slow down and let's like talk about issues and all, because they would like, you know, decompress. And then other people are like, I'm a chef, so I can make us food to like calm us down and everything like that. It's like, okay, cool. And then like, so there's all these different, you know, aspects of it that creates like this new refreshing experience of like a fantasy game. So instead of just like, you know, sword and board where you go and kill whatever, you know, looks evil or whatever, you now have to manage your emotions and kind of like really care about your character. And it's created like a much more intimate feeling, you know. And like, because
there's an automatic buy-in for you as a player.
Yeah, exactly. So and everyone has hindrances, you know, in it. So when you create your character, you have to roll on a table to be like, I'm allergic to healing potions, so we have to find like and like all that sort of stuff.
That.
So it's like just little like quirks and everything like that. So when you create your character, it feels very like intimate. It's not just a like, you know, a fighter who's like really tough, you know. It's actually someone who that you can see, feel, and all that kind of stuff, and it's really like it's cool, you know. So after creating Emerald Templars and seeing how like happy a lot of people were with playing it, it just really inspired me to make like want to tackle more projects and do more things and all that kind of stuff. So that's Emerald Templars in like a nutshell and all that. There's a lot more to it, but that's like, you know, a little bit of it. Yeah.
It's so lovely. Like, it's. I want to play. I want to play right now. I want to play in it right now.
Thank you. Yeah. You will soon enough.
I soon enough. But I think that it's lovely, the addition of a mechanical addition of adding a way to track the emotional journey that a character is going through, you know, and how it changes and fluctuates and can be worsened or made better based on surroundings and companionship, or the opposite of companionship. Because it does make it easier from a player perspective to resonate with that character more, because even if they are a fantastical race that doesn't exist, or a fantastical creature that does not exist in the world as we know it, that doesn't mean they don't have emotions, you know. And so you might have, you know, green skin and like iridescent, you know, hair or scales, but you just watch like one of your best friends do a really big murder in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah,
How would I
one of my
feel
favorite
about that?
exact I remember one of my favorite moments was like it was a chronomancy, like time magic sort of like situation. And the chronomancer got one on them and they like transported back like 40 years into the past and we're stuck there. And I was like, all right, guys, so you're gonna take 10 points of anxiety from this. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Because them as players got scared, and they could totally resonate with their character being like, oh, my character is definitely scared because I'm scared. And so it was really cool. It was a really cool experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about one of the first things that one of the first TTRPG experiences that I had with you, because I think this is kind of, it's tangentially related, in the fact that, we both have, Latin heritages. They are different.
Yeah.
Yours is, Mexican based, mine is Puerto Rican based. But I think one of the first things I ever actually met you on was, I believe, Robo Goblin's Oops All Latin event, I think is what it was, because it was either I think was it Kids on Brooms that you ran, like a one shot of Kids on Brooms?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I mentioned it on the first episode of this season. But that was the first time I had ever been at a table of Latin players. It's the first time I had been in a call conversation with Latin people outside of my family, period.
Yeah.
More than just like on a occasional one-on-one basis. And it was, I vividly remember at the end of the game, like towards the end of the game, it was an emotional, wonderful game. I don't know if it's available online. If it is, I'll link it somewhere. But the game itself was heavily steeped in emotion. But I remember fighting back tears towards the end because I just looked at the entire table and was like, oh, this feels so good. This feels so right. This feels so natural. And I had never played with any of y'all before. I think I played, I don't remember if Lonzo Gonzo was in that game, but I think he was. I think he's the only person I had ever played with at that table before. But I felt such an immediate connection to everyone there. And plus your storytelling was so, it was so good.
Thank you.
But like that one, and when we played, when you ran Vampire the Masquerade for me, and the beautiful table that we had put together, like those experiences, and Emerald Templar, the game that you've made, has really, at least from speaking for me, it's really shown a spotlight on how beautiful Latin cultures are. How amazing our stories can be when we're all allowed to just be. To tell the stories the way that we want to tell them and not have to feel ashamed. That's where, I came from a little bit of the self-shaming of like, well, I'm not, I'm only 50% Puerto Rican. So like, I'm Puerto Rican, quote unquote. No, I am Puerto Rican. And I kept telling myself, that the little bit of self-deprecating talk of like, well, yeah, it's fine. You're white passing though, so it's fine. But all that to say, like it's so wonderful to see something like Emerald Templars, to see someone like yourself who is out there and being very loud and very welcoming of like, these are our cultures, even if some of us are still, discovering them and growing to love them more and more. But these are our cultures, and we're not going to stop talking about them. So thank you.
Of course, that's one of the things I really love, because I had the privilege of being raised by artists. So my mother and father are artists, and they were extremely proud of their Mexican heritage. So we would, they all their artwork was all about Mexican, Day of the Dead, all that kind of stuff and everything. So we would go to these different art events, and I would have to be in charge of explaining what Dia de los Muertos was about, to all these essential white people who would buy our stuff and everything like that. And it just got ingrained in me that I do have a very beautiful culture. Granted, I do resonate with you a lot because when I was younger, I hated my dark skin, because if you look at my sister, she has olive skin tone. If you look at my mother, she also has an olive skin tone. So they're very white passing, they look like Italian, Greek, you could totally pass as but I cannot, I constantly get mistaken for being either Indian or being black and everything. So plus my name is DeAngelo, so it also leans more towards being identified as black. So much so that side story, in second grade my teacher didn't even ask if I was Mexican or not or what I was. So she had me represent the entire class in front of the whole school to talk about how proud I was to be an African American. And yeah, and I'm not African American. Yeah. And that was the day that my parents told me that I was Mexican. I had no drop of African American, or I guess I do technically, but
yeah.
So it was wild. Anyways, when I was younger, I really hated my dark skin and my brown eyes, because they just weren't white. And when you looked at comic books, when you looked at TV shows or movies or novels, all of them were white, with blue eyes, green eyes. The girls who were featured in all this kind of stuff, always gravitated towards the light skinned, dudes or whatever. And I just wasn't seen. And when I would go as a kid into these game stores, especially the TTRPG ones and everything like that, I did not see myself. And even when I was 18 years old, arguably an adult, I got heavily into Warhammer, and I didn't see myself at all in any of this stuff that's been around for such a long time. And when I did see myself in stuff, or not myself, but my culture in Dungeons and Dragons, for the Yuan-Ti being this evil, hardcore, evil, Mesoamerican inspired sort of race that did sacrifices, always the bad guy, never could be the good guy, and all that kind of stuff. It just really contributed to that damaging self-image and that low self-esteem of being I'm garbage. I don't see myself, anyone with my skin tone or anything like that, being the hero, being successful, being anything, so therefore I must be lesser than, So when I got older, that sort of hurt became my strength, essentially, where I said no, I'm gonna go ahead and stand against the tide. I'm gonna go ahead and plant my flag into the ground, and I'm gonna go ahead and be proud, loud and proud about how beautiful I am, with my brown skin and my culture and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to say anything bad about anyone else's culture, but I'm just gonna say that I love my culture. I love my food, I love my music, I love all this kind of stuff, unabashedly and everything. So every time I do anything creative, I always try to add my culture into it so that it helps to normalize this sort of stuff. Because when it's so wild when we think of different media that we constantly gravitate towards European centric ideas or white experiences that are the norm and all that kind of stuff. And that's just not my story, that's not my experience. I grew up with chorizo, menudo, the Catholic Church, and all that kind of stuff, for better or for worse, and a bunch mariachis and all this sort of beautiful stuff that's all around, Vicente Fernandez and Walter Mercado and all that kind of stuff. So there's so much there that's so wonderful, and the world needs to celebrate it, and it's okay for people to be I have no idea who Walter Mercado is, because they step into one of my games and be like, holy shit, this is really cool. Now I understand who Walter Mercado is, and now I understand why you guys like him, sort of thing. Instead of hiding it away and being ashamed of it, to just let it show and everything. So I became extreme, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so loud and proud about being brown, is because I can't hide, so if I can't hide, then I'm gonna go ahead and be obnoxious with it. And thankfully it's resonated with a lot of people. It's I've had a lot of people, and again, going back to Templars too, It was a really cool experience because I actually had a Puerto Rican player. I think it was Junie Ruiz, I think his username is.
Mm.
But he was in my game. They were actually all Puerto Rican now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, so like an indigenous tribe in Puerto Rico actually uses a weapon called the Machina. You know, do you mind if I have one? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's in the game. He's like, what? And he like just was like, he was like, are you serious? And he looked at the document and found it, and sure enough, it was there. He's like, oh my God, this is the first time I've seen my culture included in a game, you know, like this. Like, and I was like, yeah, man. And then so it was cool to give people those experiences, you know, because like I want my child, because I have one who's a stepson. He's like whiter than white and everything like that. Beautiful, I love him. But my son that's 4 months old, I want him to grow up in a world that has more positive representation of his culture, and specifically in the places that I go into, you know. So like if I don't, and that's one of like the big things about me, is that like if no one else is doing it, then I'm going to do it, you know, sort of thing. So if no one else is going to have the courage to create a game that's going to have my experiences and have like positive representation of what I love, then I will write the book and then, you know, send the book over to that bookstore to have it on the shelf. That way other people can see it and then be like, you know, you know, proud of it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Sorry, that was like a huge rant.
I will never accept an apology for talking about something that you're passionate about, especially if it's something that I also very much love. So apology acknowledged, but that's as far as it goes. It's so the something that you said really I had a realization that like there is in a lot of popular media there is a lot of representation of like a lot of representation, quote unquote. There is, when Latin people are represented, a lot of the times it is very either a lot of it is Mexican or flavored, Mexican flavored, you know. And while the Mexican culture is beautiful and amazing, I don't know it, and it's also not mine. So it's also been very hard. It was very hard for a while, like 10-ish years ago, when I was starting to really like take ownership of my own heritage, to be like, well, I don't see Puerto Rican culture anywhere. I see a lot of Mexican culture because we have there's a lot of individuals who live around here, who live in like the southern states, that a lot of them are Mexican or Mexican American or anything of that mixture. But there wasn't. It was very, very hard for me to see anything that was like Puerto Rican based. And literally the first 2 times that I saw anything that was explicitly stated to have Puerto Rican elements to it was Encanto and In the Heights. Two of my non-ironically, my favorite pieces of media to come out in the last like 5 years, because it was literally, and I'm like 31 to also put it out there. It was literally the first time where I saw in something other than my family. Literally the first time that I saw Puerto Rican representation in anything that was like not it's a country that has no power because it keeps getting hit by hurricanes and is not, you know, given money to get better. You know, and it was such an astounding and beautiful thing, that I'm so glad you are embracing that it's so many different cultures of like Mexican culture. And I'm sure there's a bunch, because one of the places that I'm so thankful to have been introduced to is a space created by Ashlina, who's a fantastic creator in the online spaces, Cafe Cultivar, and being able to meet so many people from like from so many different flavors of Latin, like of brown, is so lovely. And I have zero doubt in my mind that that is the same flavor that is also in your book as well, and in your
Yeah.
work, period, as well, which is
So
just
thank you. Yeah. So I will correct you on one thing.
please.
Encanto is influenced by Colombian culture,
Yes,
but you
you
do
are.
have Spider-Verse.
Ah,
Yeah.
that
So
is true. You are
yeah,
correct. Thank you.
Miles
Thank you for
Morales is
correcting
Puerto
me.
Rican.
Thank you for
Yeah. So
correcting me.
because I also look for that too, because like for U.S. audiences or Western audiences, like Mexican stuff is so ingrained in everything because it's so close, to.
Yeah.
So when they see brown, they automatically think Mexican, but that can be
Yeah.
further from the truth and everything.
Yeah.
So like I completely, yeah. So when I see other media like influenced by like, Cuba, Puerto Rico, or like, Peru, or any of these other, cultures, I'm always so hyped about it.
Yeah.
Because everyone should be celebrated and be proud of their culture and their heritage,
Yeah.
because it's like it's one of those weird, awkward things where um yes, we are all united in the fact that we are, brown, we are oppressed, we are misrepresented, we are underrepresented, but at the same time we're not the same. Our
Yeah.
experiences are very different, even from like Phoenix, Arizona Mexican to Los Angeles Mexican, like completely different, cultures and everything. So it's like it's that wild area, yeah, but I still want to lean into the positive aspects of being like, nope, we're all together. Like we're all homies. We all
Yes.
have, our different trauma and everything like that. And yes, I'm not going to say that we're exactly the same, but we should still, band together and support one another.
Right.
Because this road is very hard. So
Yeah.
like, and like that's one of the other things that really inspired me too was, on my end, it was Latinx and gaming, because when I first got into the scene of TTRPG stuff, they were like doing their stuff and promoting it, and they were having Unidos Online, which is a big event that they were gonna have. And I just like, I didn't know about them at all. I just knew that they were like celebrating, being Latino, being like Latinx, and all that kind of stuff. But I reached out and I was like, hey, I could run something, for TTRPG stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's gaming, so let's go ahead and have you do it. And then sure enough, I performed in front of like, I think it was like 15,000 people, like on the front page of Twitch. And I was like, oh, okay, everyone. And then like, and like, but it was really cool though, because like ever since, I'm like, you're a cool dude, you can hang out with us. And like,
Yeah.
so it's been really awesome to be able to like be a part of their community, not just in the general sense, but actually in their like Slack, and be able to talk about upcoming things and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, even though like they also are assembled from different cultures, from different heritages, and not all Mexican, we're still like band together, be able to work on big projects to help like so many other people, so it's like, it's cool. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk about because we've talked a lot about making sure that you represent not only your culture but other brown cultures through the things that you help create and help uplift people in that sort of way. And you've also mentioned your kids, and so I want to talk about being a dad, being a parent, and how being both a step parent and having a young child that is having both of those sides, how that influences you as a creator, and how it changes your perspective on representing your heritage, which you've definitely talked about a bit.
Yeah.
But how that all kind of affects each other in the light of you also being a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a dad is a wonderful experience. Very hard, very like, trying at times, but still so worthwhile for me personally. Because I met my stepson when he was 3 years old, and he is now 8 years old. So I've been in his life for 5 years. And in that time, I've grown immensely because, as I said before, I've always struggled with anxiety, low self-esteem, and all that kind of stuff. But and that means that for me personally, like, my emotional range was always geared towards managing the emotions of other people. So if like, and a lot of customer service jobs as well, so someone could be either like at work or in real life or something like that, screaming at me, telling me all these horrible things, treating me like trash, and instead of standing up for myself, I would be like, oh, you're right, I'm terrible, and like, ha ha ha, just to try to
I'm
like,
so
because
sorry. Well, I'll make it better.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I didn't have a spine at all,
Yeah.
but like, because it was so terrifying to step up to people like that, Um, However, like when you become a parent, you cannot be that way. Like you cannot let your kids like run the house or like, push all over you and all kinds of stuff, because there's such like little tiny humans that are just learning and don't know at all about social norms, social etiquette, any of that sort of stuff. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't guide them into the right path, then they will go off the rails and think it's normal to treat people like, oh, it's whatever, they're not going to do anything, so I'm just going to keep doing this. So that was the biggest thing for me that I personally learned as a father, was that area that was unexplored for me previously, that frustration, and voicing that frustration and being able to express into words that like you have wronged me and you need to like establish boundaries, essentially, like and like, if you want to be on my good side, then this is what you have to do. If you cross this line, then we're gonna have problems, and X, Y, and Z, and all that kind of stuff. And which I never ever hit my kids at all, but it's still being able to communicate in a way that is able to showcase there's consequences for actions and all that kind of stuff. And I found that the way that you establish boundaries essentially for a like 5-year-old is a good way to establish boundaries for 30-year-olds, so like
it's like we're not so different.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. So in my adult life, my world changed, because like I didn't have time to deal with like bullshit, essentially,
right.
People being like oh, like you're getting popular, so now I want to hang out with you, and now I want to work with you, and I want you to be in my stuff. Whereas before, like I left you on red, I like totally showed up late to your project, I canceled last minute, I X, Y, and Z, and all that kind of stuff. So it really like it was a defining line for me, where prior to being a dad, I'd be like, oh, it's okay, it's fine, and then like after that, it was like, no, I'm not going to stand for this, like and I might not scold grown ass adults, but I will just be like, I'm so sorry, I've got a lot of things going on, I can't participate in this, I wish you the best though, and all that kind of stuff. That way they don't take any time, any peace, or anything from me, and I can focus on what does fulfill me. Also, it's the fact that like as a dad, I don't have as much free time as I did when I was not a dad,
Right.
So like, if I only have a little bit of time, then I need to use it for what's actually going to benefit me, and what's actually going to, like what I want to do.
You. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't, give it willingly to people that like are just going to abuse it or what have you. So I grew immensely from that, So it was a really big like step up, and it was also good to be a dad, to be able to help like guide my kids into behaviors and things that I really like wanted them to actually like experience. Because like prior to meeting my stepson, whenever he'd go to somewhere, he would ignore everyone, not really answer questions, not look them in the eye, not like all that sort of stuff. And now every time he goes, he like says please, thank you, he gives people hugs for like seeing them, and like just the sweet kind of things that and he is learning, also thanks to Bluey, and like but like he is like learning that like, oh, if I'm kind to other people, then they will be kind to me back, and like when I'm hurting, I can communicate that when I'm like X, Y, and Z, so that's like, I don't want my kids to grow up with the amount of anxiety and the low self-esteem that I had. So the way to get them out of that is to give them the support and let them know that they're loved in safe space, and to be able to communicate. Even if I do something wrong, I want them to call me out on it, that way we can have a conversation and be able to course correct. So it's like, it's been a wonderful experience. And as a content creator wise, it's also that struggle between like, do I stay up until 3 a.m. to write this whole thing tonight and then be dog tired tomorrow, which means I'm going to be grumpy and like, frustrated, like, and that's not fair to my family. So I really need to instead, because I have ADHD, I operate in sprints. I can like, I can do a lot in like, a little bit of time, but then, as a dad, I can't really do that because it's like doing wrong by my family, for them having to deal with a pissed off me just because I didn't get enough sleep because I chose to stay up late and like, work on stuff. So, and it's also one of those things where like, now as a content creator, I have to vouch for myself more because I'm not just like fighting for DeAngelo, I'm fighting for my family. So whenever projects come along, I'm like, am I gonna get paid for this? Like, I gotta be, and all that kind of stuff. And like, please don't waste my time. Please don't, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And so it's been a real wild experience. Like from what it was prior to being a dad to what it is now, I actually feel like I'm more productive now than when I was single and had so much free time. And because like I can't even imagine, my head can't wrap around having a whole weekend where I have no responsibilities and no one depends on me. Like that's so far from my mind. And it's so backwards that now that I do have that kind of stuff, I get so much more done, in the span of like, So
it seems like it's because you have less time, you are more intentional with it.
Yes.
Or at least that's the aim. That's the that's the goal. That's what you're shooting for.
And one of the stories I do want to tell, because I feel like it'll help a lot of other people out. When it came to Emerald Templars, even in creating it, I had the idea in my mind that I was going to be so noble with creating Emerald Templars, so much so to the point where like I'm not going to take any money from this project. I will like create it and like do it, and I'll pay everyone else and like not pay myself like at all and all that kind of stuff. So then I was working hard on it, hustling. Things were going really well. Kickstarter went and everything got funded, but then it got to the point where my wife sat down with me and she's like, oh, cool. So like, how much money do you think you're going to get from like Emerald Templars, like this project? And I was like, well, I mean, it's just a passion project. It's like, it's all good. And then that like, oh man, the heat that I got from that fight was so big because she essentially like had really, told it to me straight, was like, well, listen, every time you work on this project, you are not like contributing to the household, you're not being a dad, you're not being a partner, you are separating yourself from us to work on this, and I want you to pursue your creative endeavors, but it needs to also help us, in as well. So like it's a slap in the face to say that you're going to put all this time and energy, make sure everyone else gets paid, but you don't get paid, And that was another, low self-esteem moment that came through. Like, why am I doing a majority of the work but not getting any of the money? Like that doesn't make any sense at all, So that was like a really good coming to Jesus moment that my wife was reasonably upset with me. And it totally flipped my mind and being like, she's right. Like I'm doing all the work. Like I'm hunting for all these writers. I'm talking with them, scheduling meetings, scheduling like, promo stuff and all that kind of stuff. Why am I not taking a piece of this pie? Like it's not evil. Like money isn't evil. And like, I'm not a huge capitalist where I'm like, squeezing every nickel and dime, but I deserve to pay my bills, and it was such a wild experience that like I definitely wish I could go back in time and like tell myself like, hey, you deserve to get paid. Like don't think that anything you do like should be for free, because like unless it's for charity or something like that, that's a different story. But like otherwise, because the thing that always gets me too is that like every time I question whether or not I should get paid for something, I think of like mediocre white guys that get paid like 10 times more than me for doing half as much work, half as much research, and like creating problematic material. So like that can't be like, and that's I feel like why a lot of marginalized creators are so left behind when it comes to this like rat race of content creation, is because we don't like push ourselves to ask for what we're actually worth. We just settle for crumbs and all that. So it was a big
I absolutely do think that you hit the nail on the head of having to be your biggest fan first and your biggest advocate first, because a lot of times we're our biggest not fans. So a lot of times we're the first to
Yeah.
talk ourselves down. But I'm glad I'm grateful that you shared that story, because I think it is really important to remind folks that you are worth your time, you are worth your energy, even if you don't tell yourself that. I certainly hope that you have someone who cares and loves you enough to shout at you.
Yeah.
And tell you that you are worth your time. You are worth you are worth more than just the air you breathe. Get paid, friends.
Yeah,
Do it.
and it's such
Do
it's
it.
yeah, and it's so wild because like we constantly let ourselves get distracted by like the haters essentially.
Yeah.
When like one negative comment can like ruin your entire, for me it does at least, like can ruin my entire weekend and make me question myself and whether I should quit or keep going, or like whether there's any value to what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. And yet all the other voices that are like, I love this, like this is awesome, like genuinely I had a great time, get drowned out by this. And it's such a broken mindset, so
Yeah.
like I heavily encourage people to if they want to do something, just go and do it. Like even if you commit to this journey, lose money, and learn a lot of lessons, and still you became stronger for it. Because the next time you do a project like that, you're going to be better, faster, stronger, and are going to be able to capitalize on your stronger skill sets and everything. And yeah.
Well, yay. God, I get so hyped whenever I get to talk to you. I get so excited about existing, which is great. I absolutely encourage every single person who is able to listen to this to make sure that you check out. You've done more than Emerald Templars. You can go search for DeAngelo on the internet, on social medias, because there's a whole link tree of stuff that he's been a part of, that Vampire the Masquerade stuff, and all these other things that you are working on. Your life will be better for putting a little DeAngelo in it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But I want to make sure I said things, but I would like for you to make sure to let people know where you can be found, where the easiest place to be found. Any projects that you're working on right now, anything you want to share with the class or the community or whoever you would like to.
Yeah, so you can find me on all social medias at _DeAngelo. I'm working on a lot of projects, contributing to a lot of different TTRPGs right now. Emerald Templars is my like baby and all that kind of stuff. So that one is like on DriveThruRPG and itch.io. Feel free to like pick it up. There will be sales in the future that you can capitalize on if you. And it's only for $20 for PDF. So like. It's not too expensive at all. I want to make sure that anyone who wanted to snag it can do so reasonably and everything. And to promote the game, I will be doing a lot of sessions to be able to like show it off and to show that it's like it's real, it exists, it works, it's fun, and like please take a chance in trying it. If you do end up buying it, in our like Emerald Templars Discord, we're gonna schedule a bunch of like learn how to play sessions that way you can actually play with me and be able to do all that kind of stuff. And one of the other things I do for like my main source of income is actually be a pro GM and start playing games. So if you've ever wanted to like play Vampire the Masquerade or Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that, and you just can't find a group, or you've had groups and they kind of like fell apart or whatever, I highly encourage you to check it out, like me, but also any other GMs or whatever, just in case if you're looking for something specific, because like I have a blast running games. It's always like a wonderful experience, and I have like a bunch of like reviews and they all are positive, so I think I'm doing a good job. So yeah, make sure to check that out and start playing games and all that. So yeah.
Yay. As someone who has been in 2 one-shots at least with you, I can absolutely vouch for fantastic good time if you're with DeAngelo. So go play games with DeAngelo, and go play DeAngelo's game. Do those things. But thank you everyone for being here. Stay tuned for some more good conversations down the road. Thank you so much, DeAngelo, for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And to everyone out there, may your conversations remain candid and may your cups be filled with something cozy. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic night. Goodbye.